I'm Sarah Marshall. I've worked with some of the world's leading brands to drive business growth. And now I'm sharing my knowledge and expertise with you. In my podcast, Lessons from the Boardroom, I talk to other successful leaders to find out how they've perfected their craft, driven success, and dealt with the challenges that leadership brings. So come on, dive in. Welcome to Lessons from the Boardroom, the podcast version. Today we're in for a treat. We have a very good friend of mine, I would like to say, actually. A very good friend, somebody that I've worked with for many years. Kirsten is with us today. Kirsten is the Chief People and Culture Officer for Corinthia Hotels and has a lot to tell us. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm really good. Thank you.
Yeah. Tell everybody that it's taken us 7 times to actually introduce ourselves.
Yeah. You can have to stay tuned for the bleep a bit at the end.
Yeah, are we bad languaging or not bad languaging?
Entirely up to you.
What
happens.
I am so pleased you're here. We've tried for a while, haven't we, to get you here?
Yeah, we have. Busy, but here we are.
So this is the way it works. I'm going to ask you very few questions. And the whole point of the podcast, and actually Lessons from the Boardroom in general, is to take lessons from leaders such as yourself who've been in the trenches, who've been there before, and to share those lessons with others to try and avoid the pain. If we can avoid some pain of leadership and business, then why not? Let's start by having a little chat about how you got here. How did you get to be the Chief People and Culture Officer at Corinthia? Because this sounds like a dream job.
And it is. So in terms of how I got here, you know that I have made several attempts to leave hospitality. So I had my formative years in hospitality with Hilton Hotels, and then did various kind of other sectors, always, I suppose, kind of boomeranging back into hospitality. So where else have I been? So technology, logistics, professional services, FMCG, where else? Science, tech, innovation, but equally always kind of with that smattering of I need to kind of almost go back to my roots and then come back out again. So this really was a stars aligning kind of moment. So I had finished the role that I was doing previously. I was out of the sector again for about 8 years, and then just having had a bit of a break, started tentatively kind of approaching the network as you do, and had somebody contact me immediately to say, cannot believe this has happened. I've just literally put you on a long list for this role. And one thing led to another, had great initial kind of meetings, and here I am.
Brilliant, you see.
Thank you.
Yeah. Everybody recognises how brilliant. What is it, do you think, about the hospitality sector that appeals to you so much, that you like so much?
I think going back to those formative years, I know that I was really fortunate that I had started my career in such a people-centric organisation, and given that this is my, I guess, technical discipline, and it's what makes me curious. I just love being around people. I do. I know it sounds a bit cliched, but I genuinely do. And the whole kind of emotional intelligence piece around this, I think hospitality gets a real bad rap, and I think I'm on a bit of a mission really to raise its profile. I think particularly here in the UK, it's not necessarily seen as a heralded kind of career or profession to actually go into. But if you think about, hoteliers are custodians of millions and millions and millions of pounds. They have the ability to make or break someone's amazing moments, or something that they have saved hard for to go and experience, or I don't know. And there's just something about the connection and the relationship that you have with your customer as well that is nothing like anywhere else. It's intimate. When you are working in a hotel, your customers are living in your place of work. you know, so the intel that you can get to really enhance and anticipate what it is that the customers or your guests in our case are going to need. It's fascinating for someone who's a real kind of, I guess, scholar of behavioural psychology. It's just an amazing case study.
Can I tell you, as an aside, what happened to me 2 weeks ago?
Tell me.
So you know my home situation. I never get a night off. My friend came from the Isle of Wight to give me 2 nights off. Never, ever, ever, ever happens. So I booked into a lovely hotel on the first night. So this is for sleep, right? All I want is sleep. On the first night at 11 p.m., the centralized music system goes off at full blast. At midnight, I'm in reception crying, saying,
Oh,
you don't understand.
understand.
And this is exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
That intimate relationship. I am not in a hotel. In that hotel, I was not buying a bed. I was not buying a room. I was buying a rest, a break,
Yeah.
sanctuary for me. I mean, the hilarious thing was they called it hibernate. I bought this package they called hibernate, and I'm like, I'm not fucking.
Oh my God.
It was exactly that. It was that this particular place, whilst they tried to deal with the practicalities, they didn't recognize at all what I had bought.
Need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had not
Yeah.
bought a bed or a room. I had bought rest. They had sold me on hibernation, tranquility.
Yeah.
And then it was like I was in a sodding Ibiza nightclub at
Oh
3
God.
a.m. Yeah, it was honestly, Kirsten, you've never known anything like it.
And how did they resolve it though? That's my
It went on till 1 a.m.
right.
I was wandering around. They gave me various keys. I was wandering around with keys to see if there was another room that I could move to that wasn't loud.
Oh no.
Eventually, it went off at 1 a.m. Nobody apologized till 3 p.m. the next day. And then I mean, the shit just got shitter. Then I got a call from school saying that my youngest had chicken pox and I had to go and get her. So that was the end of my 2 night break. Anybody
Oh.
who's feeling sorry for me right now, you know where to send vouchers for lovely hotels.
I know.
It was
Stay at Corinthia. We'll look after you.
honestly, it was,
Oh, bless you.
yeah,
But it is that kind of thing, and it's, you know, things go wrong.
yes,
I can't pretend that there hasn't been, I don't know, fire alarms going off at ridiculous times, and you know, power cuts and generators not working, and da 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 da. But it's as much about how you recover that,
yes,
and in a very individualistic way. You
yes,
know, what is going to be an apology for one person is not going to necessarily cut the mustard for another, and being able to recognize that and to deliver on that it's a skill. There's a real art to it.
yeah. And something that lots of other sectors can probably learn from.
Yeah, I'd
Anyway,
say.
enough of my disastrous non-break.
Bless
Let's
you.
talk about, oh mate, let's not
I'll
talk
get it
about,
all out, a bit cathartic.
I just wanted sleep. Funnily enough, when I got home, my kids were like, did you have a nice rest, mummy? Huh?
They were bouncing all over you. No.
Let's talk about lessons that you've learned.
Okay.
Tell me the best lesson you've learned in your fabulously successful career.
Oh, so the best lessons, I would say, often come from the worst situations that you've found yourself in, and
Yeah.
that's certainly the one that I want to share with you. The phrase, there's a reason why when you're on the aircraft and they're giving you the safety briefing, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on before helping others. That phrase seems to be quite widely now and quite commonly used. But I first heard that, I'd say probably around 10 years ago, with an executive coach who I was working with. And in terms of, you know, you kind of nod and go, yeah, I get that kind of thing. But actually, it's not until you really do need to put that metaphorical oxygen mask on that you recognize the value in that advice. And that's the best lesson that I've learned. So, you know, I think you have to really understand yourself. If I go back to those kind of formative years in my career, huge amounts of investment in terms of my own kind of personal development, rose through the ranks quite, relatively quickly, was exposed to huge amounts of different kind of cross exposure, different projects, different areas of the business, all of that. And so you've got a modus operandi, haven't you? You will be, I think because of that, you build resilience, you are tenacious, you are curious, you are wanting to be involved, you're wanting to deliver. You, in my case, again, being very much aware of the protection of the brand and the quality in which you delivered and. And so you take that into a new environment, which is what happened with me, and that same modus operandi isn't necessarily delivering as quickly or as much quality or as much impact or as you were kind of previously, but you keep going and you keep going and you keep going. And it's not until you kind of understand why and what drives you that you can then start to understand, so what do you then need to do to dial some of that down? And in my case, it was very much around, I have a deep-rooted sense of responsibility, and how that shows up in me is, if I say I'm going to do something, I'll do something. And sadly, that's quite often to the detriment of of myself.
Yeah.
And this happened to me. I ran into a metaphorical kind of brick wall and was described as looking as if I was like dead behind the eyes. I'd show up in meetings and I'd go through the motions and I'd say the right things, but I'd lost that energy and that spark and that motivation, I think, and that ability to kind of influence others to come along on that journey. And so yeah, I had what I would say is a breakdown, not medically referred to as that. What was diagnosed was depression. And that just blew me away, because again, knowing who I am and knowing how I enjoy life and, back to that energy around people and
A radiator.
Sorry?
A radiator.
Oh yeah, but to have that as a diagnosis, with at that time all the kind of the stigma that was perceived to be around that, well, I'm a high performer and I can do this and I can do that, and and so that was the best lesson for me, that as much as you have been, developed, progressed, have achieved, there is nothing that is more valuable than recognizing those signs when, first of all, your usual ways of working are not necessarily getting you to the place that you need to. So have a look at yourself, but look at the environment in which you're operating in, and cut yourself some slack. Again, there are phrases that are being used around, be kind to yourself, and I do advocate for that. I genuinely do. So if I give you some like practical how that's translated, we talked there about lessons for people. I do not any longer kind of sign up to, I don't know, if I'm ill, but I'm online. If I'm ill, I'm ill. You stop, you pause, you rest, you get better, you come back. Nor do I, have an out of office that reads, I'm on holiday, but call me anyway. No, I'm not. I'm on holiday. And I think, there's still that inner voice that goes, this isn't like you. You're usually, but does it make me any less of a leader? No. Does it make my performance dip? No. I think if anything, it actually improves both of those things, because it means that, I get the energy back and present with my family. I take a break. I give my mind a different space to go to, and then I come back to it. So that's my big lesson.
As somebody who's like so passionate about the culture side, your field, how do you deal with that? So if you're in an environment where the rest of the leadership team doesn't necessarily have the same approach or belief, how do you deal with that? Because is it your job because you've got culture in your title?
Yeah. I think it's every leader's job. And we have a mutual acquaintance that we've had this debate about, why is culture in in one person's title. And I think that's more certainly in this sector. I would say, or this environment, I say it's so important. It's the real heritage of the founder that is still around today as our chairman. Those values, that purpose, that set of principles almost that this was founded on, this organisation. I think there is almost a need for, someone's got this, there's a custodial kind of piece around it. But you're absolutely right, in terms of weaving that then into what does that then mean for people's behaviours. And so, I might have been a great leader because I've delivered, X amount of profit, or I'm doing X amount of turnover, or what have you. But actually, how have I got to that? Because the way that I've got to that is at the detriment of other people, right, with a complete disregard for the values of the organisation and the business. Then that in itself is a measure of your poor performance, frankly. And so the way in which I try to do this, and again, I think you've got to be really upfront right from the outset, because people will self-select. This is who we are, this is what we do, and this is how we expect you to show up as a leader in our business. And if that's not for you, that's absolutely fine. And that's not creating robots, at all. It's basically giving you some North Stars. When the going gets tough, just rely on the values. What are they? How do we make decisions, those difficult decisions, by looking at it and weaving them through the entire people practices, right through. We recruit against them, we identify talent against them, we performance manage in terms of the behaviours, etc., etc. So and back to lessons from the boardroom, there's one thing that you might well have nicely laminated posters, but if no one's demonstrating it, then what's the point? And it's about that holding each other to account, really, in terms of the behaviours. And that's not just one person's job, that's the job of everybody in this organisation.
Because if you went to somewhere like Raffles, stay at Raffles, or you go and get a job with Raffles, I'm completely making this up, it's just from the outside that I'm, a perception that I have. If you went to get a job at Raffles, I think you would say, okay, well, they've got customer service in their culture, that is the top thing. Whereas if you went to stay at Travelodge, you wouldn't necessarily have a clear view of what their culture was. And as a culture leader, there's a job of kind of defining and making that relevant to every single employee, isn't there? When it's not that clear, when it's not something quite as iconic as a Raffles, how do you create that culture that then becomes more than culture? It's like a thing, it's a living, breathing, well, that's just what we do here because it's a thing. How do you do that?
It's innate. I think the best example I've got of that is at the Bulgari Hotel. So we opened the Bulgari Hotel, and again, I'm using hospitality as a reference because this is the one that everyone gets excited about. So
never known how to pronounce it.
Bulgari. It's not the same with a northern accent, is it? Bulgari. So when you recruit in hospitality, you tend to have these beautiful palatial places that form part of your attraction strategy. People walk into a building and, oh, it's going to be great to work here. I can really see myself here. And we had a building site. So we had to demonstrate with nothing, like absolutely nothing, what it was going to be like to work in this team. And so for me, if we were, we were recruiting, we were, putting the team together, we were building a phenomenal business, frankly. But that was something I was really keen to do right from the outset. So we demonstrated, and it was quite subtle, but if we gave a job offer to somebody and said, you'll have your contract within the next 24 hours, they had their contract within the next 24 hours. And ergo, when we were a fully functioning and operational hotel, if you said, back of house or front of house to whichever guest, internal or external, that something would be delivered within a time frame. It was delivered within a time frame. And I think it very much is that you have to demonstrate it.
Yes.
Because there are cultural nuances with language. We've got hotels globally now, we've got different cultural kind of practices, and so to kind of bring in that framework of this is who we are and this is what we do, yes. Sometimes it's as much about your actions as it is about the language that describes it. Yeah. And that's something that we're working really hard, to do.
Yeah, I love that. If I think back to my crying in reception at midnight, there were two people on the front desk. One of them was on her WhatsApp. Now, she said she was on her WhatsApp to the internal WhatsApp group, but she was just on her WhatsApp. And the other one was shouting at her to get off her WhatsApp. And it was, there was no...
Where did you go? Where were you?
By millions of listeners, I can't tell.
You run it past me next time before you book one of these hibernation ventures.
It was a really nice gaff. Didn't do too well. Okay, let's talk about the hardest lesson you've ever learned.
Hardest lesson I've ever learned. So this is the one that I'm really hoping does not come across as self-effacing.
We're going to go humble brag.
Self-serving, not self-effacing, sorry, self-serving, a bit like, for me. But it's meant to be, and edit it accordingly, but it's meant to be, thought-provoking or a bit provocative. One of the hardest lessons that I've learned is that all leadership roles are not valued equally in an organisation.
100, as the kids say.
What's that?
100?
Yeah.
The program, 100%, 100.
Oh, look, check you out down with the kids. 100.
Just Snapchat.
What's that?
All leadership roles are not treated equally. 100% agree.
Yeah, or valued equally, even. So, and that's hard. That's really hard, particularly when you have, let's go back to those formative years. You've worked really hard at that self-awareness piece. You've held the mirror up. You've reached, a leadership level of, and whatever that leadership level actually is, whether it be of a function, of a department, of a business, whatever it is, and invariably, and whether that be it's not valued because of, I don't know, the airtime that you're given in meetings, or even the position, subtly, the position that you placed on it, the monthly agenda, or the remuneration or the compensation, the benefits, what have you. Because by the time you've actually reached a leadership position in any organisation, then how you show up as that leader is going to have a much more significant impact, either positive or negative, on the business than any of your technical functional skills. 100%, hundo, as you say.
100.
And that's been a gradual kind of realization with me that has been hard to take, I have to say. I think for any people leaders who are out there, it's compounded by the fact that, the great statement that is made about our people are our most valued assets.
We deliver to our people.
And yet, invariably, and sincerely hope that I can get proved wrong, but invariably, the lowest paid member of that leadership team is the person who is the custodian and accountable for delivery of your strategic investment in your most valued asset.
If there's a shit in the bog, right, the customer is not going to be happy and is not going to care about your shiny baubles and your gold curtains, are they?
No.
There we are.
And that's quite hard.
Yes.
Because you get into certain situations, and given all that investment and given all that like hard work that you've done, you kind of like, you think it's appropriate to behave like that. Wow.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about businesses actually designing themselves in a way and structuring themselves in a way that enables leaders,
Yes.
so that it's less about that technical and functional expertise, because that's a given.
Yes.
That's already in situ.
Yes.
It's how you then lead them,
Yes.
and how you behave as a leadership team and understand things in the round and have a holistic approach. So back to your point, no, it's not just me that looks after the culture, and nor is it the CFO that looks after just the CFO that looks after the finances. You know, so that there's something there, I would say, that has been a bit of a hard lesson for me. You know, advice as to how you deal with that or what have you. You know, in all fairness, again, one of our mutual kind of connections, should we say, you know, when I did kind of present that as more of a throwaway comment, actually, she addressed it.
Yeah.
You know, and she addressed it, and it wasn't to do with gender, and it wasn't to do with any other kind of diversity. It was to do with the statement that kept being made about, first and foremost, you are a leader of this organization, and then you have some functional responsibilities. Okay, so pay us accordingly then.
Yeah.
So that's something. It does become, I think, you know, certainly in the people space anyway, the more senior that I've got, and kind of living with this type of dynamic, it's within our gift to kind of influence remuneration and equitable kind of value packages, if you put it that way. But equally, I think it's almost like becomes a little bit more vocational.
Yeah.
You know, you still understand the value that you add, absolutely understand it, and it does become a little bit more vocational than, you know, the motivation isn't necessarily, you know, the package, so to speak. But that was a hard lesson when I first learned that was invariably the status quo.
Well, I loved the fact that in the organisation that we worked in together, that you had the strength of character. I don't know what it is. You did something about it. You did something about it for the collective good, not just for you. You didn't say, pay me the same as the CFO. That wasn't what you said. You said, we are a leadership team. We are ultimately responsible for the leadership of this organisation. Treat us that way first.
Yeah. And then there's more equitable kind of elements to that. So, you know, I really valued working 4 days a week.
Yes.
You know, other people really valued having a travel allowance. Other people really valued having more holidays. You know, so there were the construct of things like that can be developed in and around the individual. Yeah, absolutely. But when it comes to the value that roles add in, that's where I think we need to be a little bit more progressive around some of this stuff.
Yeah, and I don't think that it's common practice for a leadership team to all be on the same page.
No, I know. It really isn't. But that's the thought-provoking bit. Should it be?
We'll get a CFO on and see what they say. Maybe we can get a CFO who's had to take a pay cut to pay for his CEO to get more money.
Yeah.
Tell me, if you had one piece of advice for other leaders, what would it be?
Don't try and be anything that you're not.
That's so true.
It's either going to cause you stress or you're going to get found out.
But how do you do that? I don't know if you remember this story that I ended up hospitalized with encephalitis because I was trying to be something that I wasn't.
Yes.
And how do you tell that 30 to 35-year-old person who is on their way up rapidly, you know, they've got a fast trajectory, headed for the stars, and they're like, no, I've got to. How do you convince that person? No, you don't.
So I, as you know, am a real advocate for strengths-based coaching. So there is the particular tool that I use. I'm not going to do like an advert, or can I, Gallup? Clifton Strengths, it blew my mind when I first came across it, because quite often all these kind of personality profiling and preferences and your behaviors and blah 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 can kind of pigeonhole you, but equally give you a way out. So I think, for insights, well, I'm a red. And that still doesn't give you the get out to kind of shout at people or be angry or what have you. So looking at who you are with the strengths profile, there is a 1 in 55 million chance that you will have the exact same strengths profile as anybody else in the world.
Wow, I did not know that. Oh my God.
So your talents are fully formed by the age of 5, and dependent on the nature nurture, so what you experience, what you are exposed to, will end up helping you to shape your strengths. So in a similar way that when you work out at the gym and exercise at the gym, you'll develop your muscle strength, physical strength. It's exactly the same with talent. So although you might have the same talent profile,
yes,
the way it shows up in you and the blend in which it shows up in you will invariably be very, very different depending on how you've exercised that throughout your formative years. And so I go to that, and the number of, you've just described them perfectly, the number of people who are in that developmental phase who I have coached, whose opening gambit has been, right, who do I need to emulate? And it's like, no one, same outcome, different approach. Yeah. And to help people to really understand who they are and where their innate strengths are, and when actually they might need to dial those down as well, because for those who don't mirror that profile or don't understand that profile, or might have not necessarily had much exposure to those strengths or those talents, they might well receive those in a very different way. And so being mindful of that when those go into override, and how you kind of equalize that, is something that I think is invaluable. And that goes back to my responsibility. I know when I need to dial it down.
Yeah. And that's so interesting, isn't it? Because historically, all of that stuff would have been the responsibility of one's employer. We're going to put you on this course, we're going to put you on that course, we're going to teach you how to do this, this, and this. But I think increasingly there is a need for us to take accountability for our own level of self-awareness and to understand how we function within the greater environment. And that's our job, isn't it? We have to do that for ourselves.
Yeah.
I've just realised the time. Right, one last thing, because I know you've got a course to go to. I mean, we could do this all day, but I know you've got. What is next for Kirsten?
Oh, God, I don't know, and I'm fine with not knowing.
That's awesome. That's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, you've only been in your new job for
6 months. Yeah. I would, back to what I've said, I would love to eventually, I mean, there's a big enough job to be doing here, but I would love eventually to somehow, I don't know, raise the profile of this amazing sector that I've, come back into, and maybe get some funding or something to just give it the status that it really deserves.
On a mission. Kirsten, you are one of my favourite people. You are such a radiator. I don't think in all the years I've known you, you've ever been a drain. Always a radiator. Always. My cheeks always. I'm smiling so much.
Likewise. Thanks, Sarah. And no, thank you very much for inviting me on here. Thank you.
Again, same time next year. See what happens.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. You look after yourself. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.